Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Atenas and this is Mode Bespoke. For today's tutorial, I'm going to teach you how to make a ripped brim for your crochet beanies. So let's get started. So here is an example of a project I crocheted using this brim. So this is the ripped brim. It's really easy to make, it is very beginner friendly, and it is probably the easiest brim I have ever crocheted. And I've tried several different patterns, but this is the one we're going to be working on today. This hat, so the pattern for this hat is available here on the YouTube channel. I have two different versions of it, so you can check those out. So it's both of them. It's one for the beginners and then one for more advanced crocheters. So I'll link those down in the description box below. This other brim is the one we're going to do next week, and this is a Tunisian crochet, so that's for next week. This one is the super beginner brim. All you're going to use is a double crochet to create this brim. It is quite thick. I do recommend this brim though, even if you are an advanced crocheter. This is the brim I recommend when you're using medium weight or chunky yarns. And that's because it leaves a little bit of spacing between the stitching. Now, if you're going to be making a hat that is you want really tightly knit, then I recommend you use the brim we're going to be making next week, which is the Tunisian one. So I recommend you take a look at that one as well, and then just test them both out and figure out which one you want. Now, for this hat, I should tell you now, I did use a super fine yarn. So this is a size 1 fingering yarn because I was looking for a specific thickness for my project, and also because I really like the drape of this yarn. So it's nice and it's heavy without it being bulky. So you will see that in the tutorial for that hat if you go check it out. Now, for this tutorial, I'm just going to use a medium yarn. So this is just, I think it's like 3.5 yarn. And I'm going to be using a G-hook, this is a slightly bigger G-hook. This is 4.75 millimeters, although I think normally G-hooks are 4.25. But you can use any yarn and any hook you want. If you have questions as to which one is better or anything, you can leave it down in the comments below. Also, pay attention to future video tutorials where I will tell you what brim we're using, and I will also tell you what size yarn and what size hook. I'll give you all of those specifics in all of the future tutorials so you don't have to stress about it. But if you still don't know, just leave me a message or a comment down below. So let's start with the slip knot. So wrap the yarn around 2 fingers, and you're going to make a loop around those fingers. Now take your hook and insert it into that loop. Now you're going to grab the yarn that's right above here and pull it down and through that loop. Now just hold the loop that you have on your hook. There we go. I'll let that slip. Hold it down with your index finger. Now remove the fingers in your other hand and tighten the knot by pulling on the loose threads. If you want to tighten this little top part of the knot even more, just separate the 2 threads and pull on them. So your initial chain is going to be the length of the circumference of your head. So whatever your head measures around is how long your initial chain needs to be. Next week's tutorial, we're going to work with the width. For this one, our initial chain is the circumference of your head. If you don't know how long a chain to make, look in the description box below. I'm going to leave you with some of the common measurements, and these are the ones, they're just average measurements for different sizes, and that's starting with newborn, going all the way to adult. But you need the circumference of your head, and that's how long your chain is going to measure. So you don't have to work in multiples of anything, and you don't need a specific stitch count. So we're going to start with our chain. Let me get all this out of the way and zoom in a little bit. So to make a chain, you're going to wrap your yarn around your hook. So, and then we're going to start here at the bottom. Remember that we're going to make it in the length of the circumference of your head. So we're going to start with a chain 1. So you need to yarn over, and that's wrap your yarn around your hook. So this loop right here, we're going to pull it through the bottom loop. So this top one goes through the bottom loop on your hook. And that's a chain. Let's do a second one. You're going to yarn over, so wrap the yarn around your hook, and then you're going to pull this top loop through the bottom loop. And that's 2. Yarn over and pull through the loop. 3, one more, let's do that, yarn over and pull through the loop on your hook for 4. Now continue working your chain until you reach the length that you need. Again, if you need a reference number, just look in the description box below. I have a couple of measurements there. So once we finish this, I just need to make a chain that's long enough so I can loop it around. All right, so I can show you how to sew everything together in case we're working a project in the round. So we finished our initial chain. Let's just pretend I have a nice long chain and it's, I don't know, 20 inches for an adult hat. We have to start our next row. So what I like to do is I like to pinch this very last stitch just to keep it from getting smaller. So I'm just going to pinch it and then chain 2. So we go 1 and 2. And now we're going to start our first double crochet in the 3rd stitch from the hook, which is the stitch that we pinched. So count 2 stitches, and in that 3rd stitch is where we're going to begin our first double crochet. Now to double crochet, you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to insert your hook into the stitch. So into that 3rd little stitch from our hook. So insert your hook, and then you're going to yarn over, and you're going to pull up a loop. So pull your hook out of the stitch. So there's the loop that belongs to the stitch here. It's that top one. So yarn over and pull through that stitch. There we go. You're going to see you have 3 loops on your hook, and now we have to close our double crochet. So we are going to yarn over and pull through 2 of those loops. So these top 2. So there's 1, 2, and then you're going to yarn over and pull through the 2 remaining loops on your hook. So yarn over and pull through 2. So that's 1 and 2. So that is a double crochet. Let's go into the next stitch where we will also make a double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, get a little more yarn here, and now you're going to insert your hook into that next stitch. And then you will yarn over and pull up a loop. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, and now you have to yarn over and pull through 2. So there's 1, 2, and then yarn over and pull through the 2 remaining loops on your hook. And there we go. Let's do one more together. So you yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, and now you yarn over and pull up a loop. You have 3 loops on your hook, and now you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. So 1, 2, yarn over and pull through 2. 1, 2. And there we go. So now just continue to crochet a double crochet in every single stitch of your chain. And while we're doing that, I'll tell you a little bit more about both of the brims that we're going to be crocheting here. So the one that we're working on today is the easiest of the 2. You can use it for any crochet hat pattern that you want. So whether it's my pattern or anyone else's pattern, you can just make your brim and then work the top of the hat. The difference is going to be in whether or not you have to crochet in the round or you crochet flat and then sew your hat closed. So once we're done making this little sample of the brim, I'll teach you how to sew your brim closed in case you do a project in the round. But again, you can use this brim or the brim I'm going to teach you next week in any and all of the patterns, whether they're mine or anyone else's. So I try to make it as versatile as possible. So if you like this look, use this one. Otherwise, if you want a more tightly knit one or you're using a very fine yarn, then you can use the one that we have for next week. So just know that going forward, you will probably see the brim that we're going to be working on next week, as it is the one I prefer to use. But let's finish up these last stitches here and we can move on to the next row. So here is the very last stitch. We need to make our last double crochet and we're ready for row 2. So this is what our work looks like so far, and let's keep going. So at the beginning of every row, you will start with a chain 2. So here's my chain 2. Now turn your work around, and it's very important to pay attention here because we are going to be working with the posts. So this up here is the stitches. So these little guys right here, all of these are the stitches. These down here are the posts. So let me show you these. We're going to be working in this section. So you're going to ignore the stitches completely, and we're going to work a front post, and then we're going to follow it up with a back post, and then front post, and then back post. So if I say front post, you're pushing the post forward. And when I say back post, you are pushing the post back. So it'll look like this in the end, which is the effect that we have going here on this brim. So it's just alternating between front and back posts. And they're all worked in double crochets, so it makes it really very easy to do. And it's also a very fast brim to crochet. So moving on to this very first post, let's take a look at what we're working with. We're going to be skipping the very first stitch. So this is the first post. This one right there. This is just the chain, so you skip that one. You're going to start on this first post of the row. You're going to make a double crochet, so yarn over, and you're going to insert your hook behind the post. So insert your hook towards the back and then push your post forward and pull your hook out on the other side of the post. So that's what it looks like in the back. This is what it looks like in the front. Now you're going to yarn over and pull your hook out. So pull up a loop, and now you just finished your double crochet. So you yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on your hook. So that is our first front post double crochet. This next one, we're going to work it as a back post double crochet. So yarn over, and you're going to insert your hook from the back, and you're going to bring it towards the front because you're going to push your posts backward. So you're going to push that to the back, and then your hook comes out on the other side of the post. So that's what it looks like in the front. See, the hook is in front of the post, and the post is in the back. And now you yarn over, pull up a loop, and now you just finish your double crochet. So yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. And there we go. So you're going to be making a front post double crochet in all of your odd number stitches and a back post double crochet in all of your even numbered stitches. So for anyone who's a more experienced crocheter, you can just continue alternating between front and back post double crochets until you finish the row. And now for all of my beginners, let's take a look at this next post. This is post number 3. So we're going to work a front post double crochet. So yarn over and insert your hook behind the post. So the post has to be in front of your hook. Now yarn over and pull your hook out. So now you've got your 3 loops, and now you just close your double crochet with a yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now let's look at stitch number 4, and we're going to crochet that as a back post double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook from behind our work, and you're going to push the post backward. So use your hook to push the post back, and now yarn over and pull up a loop, and just close your double crochet. Let's go to the next stitch. That's going to be worked as a front post double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, insert our hook behind the post so that we push the post forward, yarn over and pull up a loop, and then you close your double crochet. And then we'll do one more back post together. So here's the back post. You're going to yarn over, insert your hook from behind your work in front of your post and push the post backward. Now you're going to yarn over and pull up a loop and close your double crochet. And there you go. So it's kind of starting to take shape. You'll see your front post kind of pop out towards the top of your work, and then your back posts kind of pop out towards the back of the work. So you're going to see, if you're looking at it in the front view, they just kind of sink behind the front posts. So you'll have a post in the front, one in the back, one in the front, and that's all you have to do for the remainder of your row. So I'll just kind of work on these as quickly as I can. If you need to pause the video so that you can finish working on this row, go ahead and pause that. I'll see you again in just a moment. Alright, so here we go. I finished my row and I just kept alternating between front and back post double crochet until I got to the very last post. Now for me, it was a front post double crochet. Remember that we did not use a specific number of stitches, so you could have ended in a back post double crochet. If you did, don't worry, it's okay. all you have to do is just pay attention to this next part. So this next part is the important part. So it doesn't matter what stitch you ended on. As long as you worked that last post, you're going to get to this little, is it a half circle, I guess? It's just the chain 2 we did at the beginning of the row. So the beginning of the previous row, we did that chain 2. This is what it looks like. So we're going to work one last double crochet into that stitch, and that's going to help us maintain our stitch count. So what you're going to do is you're just going to make a regular double crochet. So yarn over, you're going to insert your hook into that chain space. So it's this little gap right here. So it's that space created by the chain 2 that we made. So it's the one at the beginning of the row. If you can't find the chain space, just pick one of the stitches here at the very end and insert your hook there. So the world won't end if it's not perfect. You're going to sew this together anyway, so you're going to be okay. So just make that last double crochet. Will be the last stitch of the row. It's very important that you do not forget this stitch, because if you forget it, your work is going to start to narrow in on the side. So it's going to be more of a triangular brim instead of a rectangle, which is what you want when you're going to crochet a hat. So don't forget that last stitch. It is super important, and I'll probably tell you 1 or 2 more times. So let's begin our row with a chain 2 like we do every time. We're going to turn our work around, and now this row and all the other rows after this one are going to be incredibly easy because you have a guide. So this is a front post, and these are the back posts. The back posts have this little chain in the middle, so that indicates that it is a back post double crochet. And you can see the back post sticking out back here. It is important to be able to tell the difference between them because you're going to be extending the stitch. So you're going to crochet a back post double crochet in all the back post double crochets and a front post double crochet in all of the front post double crochets. So now let's take a look at our crochet work, because you're going to have to identify where it is you're going to crochet. So these up here are the top stitches. These little circles, skip those. So you're not going to work into those at all. Remember that we are working exclusively on the posts. So this middle section right here, so it kind of looks like a stitch, but these little middle gaps, that's where you're going to be working. And there's another set down below, so these, ignore those too. So you're going to be working in the middle. So let me open this up in front of a front post so you can see it. See, there's the front post, and if you just pull on your work a little, you can see these top stitches, and then you can see the middle ones. So right here. Ignore the bottom ones. So always work in these middle stitches. So right here. If for whatever reason you end up stitching in the top or the bottom, it'll become really very obvious and you'll be able to fix it. So don't stress out in case you mess up. It's okay. It might take you a few times practicing this if you're a beginner. But this is the look we are going for. So here's the brim. See that it's ribbed? So all of these are front posts. The ones that are kind of sunk in here, those are back posts. So you can kind of see that it looks a little wavy when you look at it in the side. That's what we want our brim to look like. So to do that, you're going to have to identify what this first stitch is. So this first one is a back post because it's got that little middle chain. That is a back post, so we will have to crochet a back post double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook towards the front of your work, and then push your post back. So your hook's going to come out on the other side. So here's our post. See, it's right behind our hook. Now yarn over and pull up a loop. And then all you have to do is just finish your double crochet. So there's the first stitch. The next one, as you can tell, it is a front post double crochet. It's popping up right in front right here. You can feel it because it's popping out in front of everything else. So we're going to crochet it as a front post double crochet. So yarn over, insert your hook behind the post, and then you're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and finish your double crochet. The one after that is a back post double crochet. So there you go. You can clearly see those little middle stitches. That's where we're going to be working. So let's yarn over, insert your hook into that middle stitch towards the front of the post, and now you're going to push your post back and pull your hook out on the other side. And now you yarn over, pull up a loop, and complete your double crochet. And we'll do one last one together, and that is a front post right there. See the little middle stitches? Yarn over, insert your hook behind the post so that it's pushing the post forward. That's why it's a front post double crochet. And now you're going to pull up a loop, and then you yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. So there you go. You can start seeing right away that we are now extending our posts. So all our front post double crochets are going to become really obvious. The same goes for the back post double crochets. The rest of the work, for any of you experienced crocheters, you're just going to keep extending your stitches. So a front post for every front post, a back post for every back post, and you just repeat the rows as many times as you want or as you need to create the width of your brim. Sorry, I lost the name there. So in Spanish, I have to call it an elastic, but I guess in English, you have to call it a brim. So if you ever hear me call it an elastic, that's why. When I do the tutorial in Spanish, that's what it's called. But back to what I was telling you. Just keep alternating front posts, back post, front post, back post until you finish the row, and then every row after that. The width of your brim is dictated by how many rows you make. So with next week's tutorial, we're going to create the width from the beginning, and we're going to work the length of our brim, so that way we'll create the circumference. This week, we are working the other way around. So we're working the circumference at the beginning, and then we're just adding width to our brim. So here we are on the very last stitch. So again, this might be a different stitch for you. For me, it is a back post double crochet. For you, it might be a front post double crochet. Either way, work the stitch the way you're supposed to work it, whether it's a back post or a front post. And once you are through, here is this little chain space here at the end. That is where we need to crochet that last double crochet, the super important one that I told you cannot forget ever and ever, like ever. Don't forget it. Make a double crochet into that last stitch. So I just have to be sure that I super stress it, especially for any beginner crocheters, because I kept skipping it for, I don't know, the first year or 2 that I crocheted. So don't forget that stitch. All right, now let's start the very last row. I will work with you. And we're going to begin this with a chain 2. Turn your work around, and we're just going to repeat what we did the last row. So here is our front post. As you can see, it is really, really visible now. This is going to be the 3rd row of this we're going to be crocheting. So it really pops out. So all you do is just follow the guide that you've already set up, and then you reinforced in the previous row. So a front post double crochet for every front post, and you're going to make a back post double crochet for every back post. That's all there's to it. It really, truly is that simple. Just remember to skip the stitch and work in this little middle stitch, so this little middle section. So long as you're working there, your stitching is going to be beautiful, it's going to be fine, it's going to be even, and it won't bunch up. So look at that. So there you go, in the middle stitches. That's all you're doing. So let's start the first few stitches together, and then I'll leave you to complete the rest of the width of your brim. So we're going to start this very first front post double crochet, and there it was. Let's go to the next stitch, and we're going to make a back post double crochet. The one after that is a front post, so we're going to work a front post double crochet. And the next one is a back post double crochet. And there we go. I think you kind of get the hang of it now, so I'm going to stop here. But we're going to move on to sewing the project together. It's important to pay attention to the pattern itself, because there are some stitches that you cannot work in the round, or that are too complex to work on the round, such as like this Celtic weave. It is too difficult for me to show you how to do that in the round on a video tutorial and make it clean and clear enough for everyone to understand it. So we didn't work in the round. Instead, we sewed everything together. But unlike this ugly seam that you see here, I have learned a new way to sew the seam together so that it is very nearly invisible. So you just see this little bit is a bit more raised here in the back, but overall, it's still pretty invisible. It all depends on how much patience you have for sewing. But if you just take just a moment to carefully sew your brim together, you will end up with a seamless stitching, and it'll be fantastic. You won't even be able to tell, and your hat will be possibly reversible, I guess, depending on the stitch that we're using, since not all stitches are reversible. But for the most part, most of my hats, at least I'm going to try to make them reversible so you have some options. But let me keep crocheting this. I will crochet a few more rows, but to show you just where we are at, so this is 3 rows, and that I'll continue to add to the width. I'll maybe make 2 or 3 more rows. So just repeat this row that we just finished. Repeat it over and over until you have the width that you want for your brim. And once you do, this is 5 rows, I believe it was, for the brim. We're going to work on the seam. Now again, pay attention to your pattern. For the Celtic hat, I did crochet it just flat. So if that is the case, then you're going to sew your hat closed, and you'll do that along with the brim. So you'll sew everything closed at the same time. Pay attention to that. If it is a project you work in the round, then we will have to sew the brim closed so that it is round and we can work in the round. So it really just depends on your project. So this one was worked flat. This other brim, or this other hat that you will see in the future, I am still working on designing the pattern, so it may not even be this final design yet, but this is worked in the round. So I sewed the brim closed, and now I'm just working in a circle over and over until I get the width I want for my hat. So just pay attention to that, whether it's a flat project or a project in the round. So the very last stitch that you are going to do on this brim is a chain 1. So there we go. That is the very last stitch, and that's because it'll make a tiny knot right there. We want this tiny knot. It'll keep your work from unraveling there for a minute while you weave all your ends in. So if you are working in the round and you have to sew your elastic closed, you're going to need to cut a long piece of yarn because you're going to use this to sew. If you are not working in the round and you're working a flat project, cut a small tail end of yarn. So I don't know, something like 5 inches maybe. Kind of like we did at the very beginning, it's got a nice little tail of yarn. We're going to weave that in. If you don't know how to weave in ends, I have made a video tutorial for it. I will link it in the description box below because I'm not going to cover that in future tutorials. So check that out. Once you have made that chain, just pull on your yarn, remove your hook, and as you pull on your yarn, it will pull the yarn out of there and you can tighten your knot. So I'm not going to cut this yarn. This is the yarn I use for my video tutorials. I really like this yarn, so I think it's very visible. If you disagree, let me know and I'll change the yarn I'm using for these tutorials. But I'm going to attach this here so I don't have to cut my yarn. And I'm going to show you how to sew this with a highly visible yarn. So I grabbed a white yarn, that way you can see my stitching. But if you're going to be sewing this in the round, I highly recommend you just leave a really long tail end of yarn and you use that to sew your hat closed so that the yarn is the same color as your brim and it will truly be an invisible stitch. So you are going to need a yarn or a tapestry needle. So for this next part, this is the sewing part. Don't worry, you don't have to be a fantastic seamstress, or is it, what's the male version? A tailor, I guess? I'm not sure what it would be for the male version of that, but you don't have to be great at hand sewing. That's the point here. You can just wing it and you're going to learn here with me what we're going to be doing and it's going to be fantastic. Don't worry. You just need a needle that you can pass your yarn through. That's all you need. So I'm using a tapestry needle. Use whatever needle you have handy so long as your yarn fits. So now all we have to do is sew this thing together. So grab your brim and fold it over with the short ends together. And I think I should be very specific about that because it has happened before and I've gotten an email from someone who said they sewed it this way and it didn't work. So please, sew the 2 short ends together. So we're going to pay attention here to this stitching. So let's get a zoom in view here. These right here are the stitches. So you're going to see these little bits of yarn in there? Yeah, that's the stitch. That's what we're going to be sewing into. So at least for this specific pattern, that is the stitch. Once you fold your brim over in half, on the side that your yarn comes out on, you are going to sew the 2 sides together. So if this is the side your yarn comes out on, that's where you're going to sew. I recommend giving it maybe 2, possibly 3 stitches in that same stitch, just in the very bottom, because this is going to be the bottom part of the brim. So the one that's on your forehead, not the part that is connected to the rest of the hat. So normally, I don't know about you, but I kind of just stretch my hat before I put it on. But I think it might be a girl thing if you have like you don't want to mess up your hairdo or something. But so that you can stretch your brim and it won't tear apart, just give it a couple of stitches in the bottom. Once you have done that, it's time to work on our invisible seam. So take a look at these little stitches. We're going to be working into those. So your needle's going to go in through this little open space right before the stitch, and it's going to come out on the other side of the stitch. So here's the stitch. It's on our needle. So I'm going to lay this here so you can see it. That's what it'll look like. Pass your needle through the stitch. Just go all the way through. And there you go. Now you're going to work on the other side. So go to the other side and find the stitch and do the same. So your needle goes in from the bottom up towards the top. There's the stitch in the middle, and then just sew that through. As you're working, tighten up your work. I'm not going to tighten it up so that I can show you the stitching, but well, I guess I will. Tighten up your stitches as you go. That'll help you hide the stitching. Anyway, the next stitch, where your yarn comes out from the previous stitch. So you see that little white yarn where it comes out? That's where you're going to insert your needle and then come out on the other side of the stitch. So here. This one is going to look a little different. So see, it's got 2 threads. You want to go below, or under, sorry. You want to go under both of those. So that both of those threads count as 1 stitch. So it's going to be every other row, I think, that's like that. So every other stitch, I should say. So there we go. Now go to the other side, and you see where the yarn comes out? You're going to insert your needle right in that same stitch. So right in that same space, and you're going to come out on the other side of the stitch, and you're just going to sew. There you go. And then tighten it up as you go. And as you can see, except for the beginning part of the stitching, you kind of lose the yarn. So even though that I'm using a highly visible yarn, because it's a bright white yarn, it would still be an invisible seam. So that's the beauty of using this specific stitch. So I think it's like a knit stitch or something. I saw this in a knitting video and I thought it was amazing. Anyway, moving on. Let's go to the next one. Here's where the yarn comes out. So that's where we insert our needle, and we're going to do the next stitch. And there we go. We come out the other side. See, this is why you weave in your ends, so it doesn't get stuck in your work. All right, and I'm going to stitch one more. And that's all there's to it. So just pay attention to where your yarn comes out, because that's where your needle will go into on the next stitch. And then just keep stitching it that way. It'll create a nice tight little stitching so that when you pull on your brim, it isn't going to fall apart and it isn't going to have big gaps. So it'll be an even pull throughout the entire brim, which is what you want in order for it to be invisible. So just keep stitching. Once you get to the top, give it a couple good stitches. So right up here, just like we did at the bottom. So right down there. But before you knot anything, so you're going to have to knot it up at the end. But before you knot anything and weave in any ends, make sure that the spacing between your posts is even. So just take a look at your work and just kind of make sure that all of this spacing is even. And you can do that by just pulling on your work a little bit, just kind of moving your stitching around. And then you make a knot at the end of your work, and then you go and weave in the ends. So weave in this end, weave in the ends on all the other sides. Just be sure you weave them in before you do the top part of the hat, just to keep your work neat, and that way all of these little ends won't get caught up in your other work. So if you don't know how to do that, check out the video tutorial I have made where I teach you how. But that's it, guys. It was really, truly that simple. It is an incredibly easy brim to make. It is super fast to crochet as well. So any kind of quick projects that you need to make, I recommend using this brim. Let me know if you have enjoyed it. I will be posting a couple of other just kind of beginner, like small projects in the future, just so that we can speed up some of the longer tutorials, and I'll be able to create more content for you guys. So if you have any kind of recommendations, or there's anything you want to see a little more in depth, let me know. I'm happy to create that video tutorial for you. But in the meantime, if you haven't already checked out the blog, go check it out. The patterns are free. They're all on there. You can also purchase patterns if you choose to, but all of the patterns are for free. So check that out. The link is in the description box below. It is also on your screen right now. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see other pictures and other projects that I'm working on. And you can also kind of, know what is happening here in the future, since I do post those photos in advance. So you'll be able to know what we're going to be making here on the channel. Don't forget to like and share this video tutorial if you have enjoyed it. And come back next week. I do have the other tutorial, which I am working on now, for that second brim. So do come check out that video tutorial next week. But till then, have a nice week.